Hey guys, welcome back to Community Starcraft 2. We're going to do another replay review session, and this replay is going to be a Zerg versus Terran, as you guys can see on the match card. It is from SC2ReplayStats.com Season 2 Ladder Challenge, and the whole idea behind that is just to give people an incentive to play their games. So what we're seeing throughout the course of all these replay reviews is we're going to see players that are just like you. They play games on the ladder, and they go and they want to get some more information on their replays and figure out how they could have played better. One of the tools you can use to do that is SC2ReplayStats.com. Check out their site. They can analyze your replays for you, and maybe you'll get casted by me if you post on there, so check it out. In the meantime, the game we're watching has already started, of course, so we will go ahead and jump into the game. So we can see the red Terran is spawning up here at the top left of Alterzim Stronghold, and we can see the progress on this. Either way, we're going to be watching a fairly standard TVZ, at least I think so. Most of the time this is what takes place. These guys are master level players, so if you're trying to break into masters or if you're already masters yourself, you can kind of see examples of players that play games just like you, and we'll point out the mistakes that they made, see how they could play better, and of course outline the things that they do well, so you guys can take them into your own games. The Zerg, of course, is across the map, bottom left hand side. His name is SpeeDy, and I think that might stand for the Air Force team. I know Air Force Academy does have their own CSL team, so I'm not sure if he's a member of it. But Zerg going ahead, opening hatch first, which we talked about in the opener videos, that's totally viable against Terran. Sometimes viable against Zerg, sometimes viable against Protoss, but most of the time you're going to see it against Terran. This could actually even be one of those 3 hatch before pool type of plays. So we'll have to see if one of these drones is going to be dedicated to building a pool anytime soon. And he's continuing to add on drones here, so no, it's actually just going to be an extractor and then a pool right afterwards. So this looks pretty normal here. This is actually a really safe hatch first variation. So if you open up with the gas first after the expansion and then the pool right afterward. He did add on a few drones, so it was a tad greedy, but on this map it takes so long to even figure out where your opponent is that that's probably just fine. But nevertheless, barracks done here for the Terran player. He's going no gas, so it's just going to be straight into a command center, so you can see him dropping that right now. And this is one big thing you're going to see from all the different levels of leagues throughout StarCraft 2. So if you guys watch some other videos, that maybe one we just posted, you could see that the expansions for those players were so late. They had a lot of money sitting around a lot of the time. These guys are master level players, so they should keep up on top of their money pretty well. So this will kind of give you a little bit of a parallel, so to kind of say, maybe this is what my games look like, or maybe this is what I'm striving to be as I learn more about the game. But SCV coming over here trying to figure out where the Zerg is. He's of course scouting the wrong direction. That's unfortunate for him. Back at the Zerg base, just getting a couple of queens here, really standard off of this opener once again. And you definitely want these queens for injects to get more larvae, which we've talked about a zillion times by now if you've watched any of the other videos. But yeah, so we'll have to see. Typically the progressions throughout this, oh wow, third command center coming up here for the Terran. And you guys can also see, this is one thing I want to pay attention to. I didn't remember what I was just talking about, because this is a more important point, but the higher levels you're going to watch, the more quickly they're going to be taking expansions. And you can see he's already dropped a third command center. Look at the timing. This is plenty safe, because most of the time against Zerg you're not going to have to deal with a lot of things. You have a wall just in case some weird stuff happens. He needs to make sure and rally his Marines on the other side of this wall, actually. This Marine almost looks stuck, but Terran still only has an idea of where the Zerg is because he's only scouted the incorrect bases so far. As you can see, this is what he's seen. But yeah, he's gonna. Whoa, that was close. He almost let those Zerglings in, and that would have been a huge problem. There aren't that many Zerglings actually, but worst case, maybe the Zerglings saw his extra command center or something, so that could have been a big deal. But one thing I was just going to mention before I was interrupting myself several times is that these guys expand so fast that their whole goal is just to get extra bases and to just outwork their opponent in terms of just having way more units. So the difference between being like a master level player and even like a gold or even a platinum level player is just that master level players will never stop making workers. You can see their production over here of their workers is constant and never stops. And their whole idea is that they know the best way I'm going to be able to win is just to be able to make workers constantly and spend my money. And if you're doing that up until you have 3 fully mining bases, you should be just fine. Here's another interesting thing, is that the Terran just goes ahead and adds on in this safety bunker here, just in case there's some kind of aggressive play coming. He did get in here and see that gas was being mined, and he probably saw the drones actually continuing to mine it, and that's kind of what's going on in this game. He realizes that I'm being a little greedy here, and if I'm not careful I could die to something. But mech is going to be the choice from this player, and he's even adding more bunkers here. As you can see, spacing out his bunkers well enough, so if he gets baneling busted and this bunker dies right away, at least he still kind of has a position that he can hold with his second bunker. But as we can see, Roach Warren on the way, and actually, the spending here is really looking like he's going to dump into a bunch of roaches, so we'll see if that's what he's going to do. He has plenty of supply and plenty of money, and there we go, 11 roaches are on the way. So this is going to be a roach timing, and the intelligent thing from this Terran player is he's starting a tank right away. He has plenty of bunkers here, so if he controls properly, he should be totally fine against this. Here's the Baneling Nest follow-up as well. So this is going to be kind of an aggressive roach Bane timing. A second tank is on the way, so this is a really safe build here out of Volking. After he did open with the 3 command centers. So it opens greedy, but then it transitions into something really safe. The other side of this is that the third base is just barely going down for the Zerg player, while the Terran has had a 3rd command center building SCVs and dropping mules the entire time. So you have to say that if he holds this, he should be in a decent advantage, but this is a lot of stuff coming across the map, so we'll have to see how he's able to deal with that. The tank should be out there, and you want to see just tank a little further back, actually. I would scoot it back almost to right here. He realizes that and moves it over, because you don't want to ever have to, if you're dealing with roaches especially, you don't want to ever let the roaches hit your tanks. So we're going to see how he's able to deal with this. Of course, the Overlord can see everything. He sees these 2 tanks right here, and that may discourage him from pushing, but if not, he can actually just snipe these, and yeah, he's just going to walk up there and hit these tanks right away. This is exactly what I mean. You don't ever want to lose these tanks to these roaches, and even just trying to save it, he might... Nope, he dies anyway. But if he just had these tanks kind of back here a little more, and wasn't trying to get greedy and land this 3rd command center right away, he would have been just fine against this. Now he has to start leapfrogging tanks and repositioning, and he only has 1 tank to do that with. It's going to take him a lot longer than if he had these extra ones, which you can see are coming out right now. Meanwhile, for the Zerg player, that was a nice little timing. He did get what he wanted out of there, but those are the kind of things you probably shouldn't rely on. You shouldn't rely on getting 2 free tanks. If you're doing a timing like this, it should either be to win or something like that, but I guess the point I'm arriving at, I'm being really roundabout. I'm sorry, it sounds like I'm just derping out, but I'm being really roundabout, and the point that I'm saying is that if you run builds like this, you can't rely on them making mistakes like that. You need to assume that they're going to play perfectly, and that your build is just good enough to beat a perfect play. So either way, I mean, the Zerg is in an okay position right now. The supplies are basically even. But either way, this build is intended to kill. And since it didn't kill, he's in a little bit of a rough spot where he has to start playing catch-up. You can see the Terran's actually floating a lot of money now. It's kind of getting into be a big problem. He needs to add on more factories, or at very least more Marines, and he is starting up more Marines right now. Turrets are on the way, as you definitely need to be mindful of when the Mutalisk transition is going to start. So you can see this SCV dropping turrets. That was weird. I clicked on the turrets and it actually centered my vision on one that was walking to build a turret. I didn't even know that was possible. But Viking trying to scout around here, trying to get some overlords. And like I said, he needs to start moving down here, and he needs to start leapfrogging tanks to start securing this position. If he had 2 extra tanks, this would already be landed in mining right now. So you can see just positioning your tank somewhere like this can cost you a lot if they just walk up and kill it. Now there's no way he can engage into this cost effectively. You can see he lands a command center to try to attract the army here, and then just blast it away. Now he can start moving these tanks down here. These tanks won't be basically doing anything, but if you move them down here, kind of spread them out a little bit, you'll be in good shape. You can start mining. Zerg making a smart decision and taking a 4th base here, so he's looking good. More roaches on the way, so this is strange. Typically, by this point, you want to get off of roaches because they scale so poorly as the game goes on. They'll be nice in the early game. They can take a lot of damage, especially against Marines that don't have stim. But as the game goes on, their supply is going to be worse and worse. I guess okay, I have to correct myself here. I can't fault him for going roaches because I think he believes that the play here is mech. And that's what I thought at first as well. The double factory usually means I'm going to make a lot of factories and just start going mech. And roaches can be good against mech. They're usually a lot better than like Muta Zergling or something like that. But at the same time, this is really just a strange variety of Marine tank. This is Marine tank with double factory production. And that should actually just lose. The roach attack should actually just lose hard to that. You can even see, I know I harp on this a lot, but both these players still not spending their money as they should be. If you're this Terran player, you can even afford 2 more command centers with this kind of money. And honestly, since you're totally secured up with all these tanks and stuff, that's actually not the worst play ever. It's just to drop extra command centers to spend your money. Even all these SCVs being idle is kind of a big deal right now. He needs to kind of clean up on that and get those guys working. But roaches and stuff, starting to back off here. I don't know what he knows. He's sending in one Zergling, or at least patrolling it to try and figure out what's going on. This is also the point where you'd probably want to make an Overseer and just walk a Changeling in and see what you can find out. But the Command Center is landing here for the Terran player. So look at this. 14 minutes, this Terran's already taking a 4th CC. These are the kind of timings you want to shoot for. Maybe not this super early, but this is what good players do. They just make a lot of command centers, they get them down as soon as possible, and they mine from them as soon as possible. And more importantly, they do a decent job of spending their money. These guys are doing a fantastic job, but if you watch pros, their mineral will always be sitting around like 500 or less the entire game, which is craziness. But I hope you can see what makes good players good. And he's actually doing what we were talking about here, dropping extra command centers just because he has the money. And that's definitely not a bad play, especially as Terran. You can get the extra mules, you can make less SCVs, so that you can just use mules to mine out your mineral patches as well. The problem with this mini tanks though is just that it's so slow to move around. I would feel more comfortable by now, especially with the marine count, just to have start moving across the map right now and put a little bit of pressure on the Zerg. Honestly, the Zerg player should have had really no problem taking pretty much every base right now. And this is actually a pretty cute play. The Viper's being mixed in here, going to pull back the medevac so they can't leave, and he actually leaves anyway. But even still, you can pull it right back in, and now it dies. So decent spending on the Vipers there, and if you just reconsume from buildings that you don't care about, you can see him making all these extra evolution chambers just in case he goes too far. By the time you get that far, I mean, it's not really that big of a deal. So he's in good shape so far. A lot of tanks being pushed out here. You can see his tank count is enormous. Check out the unit tab. It's actually 13 tanks. There's no way this army is ever going to trade correctly against this unless they get good blinding clouds on the tank, to the point where the tanks actually just can't fire. And you want to keep them kind of spread out for that reason. So if you take a look at his tank spread, this is actually really good. Keeping the tank spread out requires him to have to drop a lot of blinding clouds in order to get good engagements on this army. So Roach Hydra is starting to move up here, and it looks like we're going to see a fight here pretty soon. You can see the tanks starting to blast away just a little bit as the Zerg didn't realize how far out the tanks were. But here come the blinding clouds now, and you can start dropping these all over the tanks. You can even just drop them in a line so the Marines won't do anything. And yeah, he kind of does, so a lot of tanks are disabled from this. You can see that if you can get those blinding clouds down, you actually do pretty well. Now you need to back off. The Zerg player needs to back off and disengage from this because he's going to be attacking his own blinding clouds. And he's done the work that he wants to do. He thinned out the tank count. He can switch into a different composition. He, of course, does have Ultralists on the way, or at least the tech is on the way. So here come the Ultralists now, 7 Ultralists coming out. And you want to do your best to save this army. There's no reason to throw this army away. Yeah, it's nice to try and deal damage and stuff like that, but this army shouldn't do much more. Maybe killing the planetary, and is he actually going to get it? No, this is not enough damage output anymore. He starts to focus on individual SCVs, but yeah, if you just disengage at the point where we talked about, he would have all the Ultralists in addition to that large army, and the Terran would still be stuck with his minimal tank count. See, I guess the point I'm getting at here is that if you see stuff like that, you want to figure out, when is my attack going to stop working, and when can I just pull back here and save my units? There's a lot of Banelings on the way here as well, which is an interesting choice considering the tank count. I guess he realized that it's tank Marine, and that you need something to deal with the Marines, but frankly the Ultralisk should be enough, especially with blinding clouds if he didn't lose his Vipers, which I think, yeah, he actually did, so it's a little sloppy of him to have lost those Vipers during that fight, considering there's really no reason for them to be in there at all. Once you get the blinding clouds down, you can see a hatchery starting to try to come down, but there are Marines standing in the way, so they'll kill that drone as soon as he walks down there. But here comes the next wave coming out here from the Zerg. This is like a turret defense game where you have to defend different waves of Zerg enemies. The tanks not being sieged is a big problem here. They're all going to die for basically nothing. The Banelings walking in here, you do want to target the siege tank fire on the Banelings, but he doesn't. And the Banelings just crash through. SCV is walking right into Banelings and Ultralisks. And even still, the Terran player held that off okay. Again, save these units. Don't... Okay, I don't know why he keeps doing this, but don't try and kill him with these units. They've already done enough. Meanwhile, a drop coming back down here, trying to focus on the hatchery, or at least getting what he can. He still does get the planetary, though, as he's fortunate the Terran player was a little bit slow to react, a little bit slow to recover. These Ultralisks, they're actually doing really well. I was expecting them to not do as well, especially with only 0 upgrades on their attack. But still, the Ultralisks are pretty strong, and the drop actually gets pushed away after doing not that much. The interesting thing, though, Terran player taking the bottom right, Terran player taking the top right as well. So if these go unscouted and you continue to hold these positions, the Terran player will be in a good spot. Now you need to start thinking about how in the world am I going to start dealing with these Ultralisks? These Ultralisks have 5 armor, and if you look at the Marines, they only deal 8 damage. So every single Marine shot is only 3 points of damage, and the Ultralisk has like 80 jillion health, and by that I mean 500 health. But still, you need to find something that's going to be better against these Ultralisks, and generally things that do more damage in one shot is going to do way, way better. So things like Thors, things like Marauders especially are really good against them, considering they fire so fast. You want to find a solution for these Ultras, and you can't just let them run wild like this, which they are kind of doing right now. The drop's trying to come back in here and do what it can. It just drops off. This Overlord should be able to see everything. And you don't need to pull your whole army back for this. He's kind of overreacting. Just pull a pack of Zerglings and a Baneling or something like that to deal with this. In the meantime, there is a second drop that's going on, trying to deny this base over here. So I mean, he should notice what's going on and maybe stim up and kill that base as soon as possible. But even just not paying attention very well for little amounts of time can result in you actually not getting this hatchery if it comes down to it. And see, this is what I mean. If you were firing at it the whole time, you get it no problem. The Zerg is actually being really slow to recover. What is he doing with his army? And the base just goes down for free. He doesn't even report to the drop. So I don't know what that was all about. But either way, 29 more Banelings. This is a ton of Banelings. And they will just destroy everything in their path. And this is intelligent here. This is something I want to remark on, is that if you're ever fighting Ultras or things like Zealot Archon or something that are melee units that are really big, for the Ultralists in this case, or Archons in the other case, build depots or pylons or whatever else to reduce the surface area. But here comes a fight, and you can see that the decent spread here is forcing the Ultralists all to kind of clump up in one spot. The Banelings just blast their way through it and knock down everything. Is this Terran player actually going to have enough to hold the rest of this off? It doesn't look like it so far. There are just these pointless Vikings in here doing nothing. And the Ultralisk coming down here, this is a time where it's fine to try and kill this base because you have plenty to deal with it. Ultralisks are going to get a full surround and knock this down right away. You can see he's now just realizing that, whoops, I forgot attack upgrades for my Ultralisks. These are 0-5 Ultras, which is so weird. But they still do a decent amount of damage at their base. You can see 35. But if these were 3-5 Ultras, it'd be a totally different story, which is what they are when they're fully upgraded. I have to say the Zerg is actually being a little bit too patient right now. Devoting his entire army to killing that planetary, I mean, I guess it's okay, but at the same time, you let this Terran build up for a lot longer. Terran's starting to press down here now, and these Marines and Marauders can micro against these Ultras pretty much all day, since there's nothing to hold them in place and no Banelings to try and get in there quicker. So the Ultras being pushed off, and this is something you need to be careful of. Zergling's going to come in here, try to surround, and you can see the army is still really fast for the Terran player, considering these are really fast Zerglings. So he does just push them back. Now he's starting to get the mining off of these bases that he needs. He needs to double check his rally on that one anyway, but if you let these bases go, and you don't deal with those, that's going to be a big issue as the game rolls on. The income, only 54 workers for the Terran player, but that's exactly what you want, because look at his mineral income. It's almost double the Zerg player, only because he has those extra mules. And if you have all the extra mules with extra command centers you have sitting around, such as these two that aren't even part of a base, and now this two is barely even serving its purpose, only mining gas. But if you get that point, and your army size is going to be really large, you can see the active forces will show 200 to 191, but the actual army size, let me see if I can remember that hotkey. Yeah, army supply 142 for the Terran player, as opposed to 125 for the Zerg. That's only because that's what they're both at when they're at 200, 200. So here comes another fight. You can see the Ultra starting to crash in here. And again, there's just so few units, it looks like, for this Terran player, but he's just so fragmented around the map, or at least around his base, that the Banelings are just going to kill everything, blowing up on whatever they want. They can even kill the command center, and yeah, they do. Now this is becoming a big problem. At the same time, you can hold this high ground for a long time, and these bases may go undiscovered. But at the same time, eventually they're going to be found. At least the Terran player is still getting out on the map, doing drops here, and trying to deal with that. But again, these Ultralists need some support. They need some infestors in order to hold the army down, so if they come out there and try to be brave, they get stuck there while the Ultralists just eat them up. So the drop coming back up here, trying to do some more damage. The Marauders are dropped off here, and they have decent position behind the mineral line. Zergling's trying to get on top of this, but they shouldn't do too much, or rather the drop shouldn't do too much, as the Zerglings will eventually surround them. Terran players still being really irritating and canceling all these bases, and this is the kind of stuff that you need to do as Terran if you're running Bio. Bio's advantage is in its mobility. So if you can be mobile and around the map and kind of be everywhere that his army's not, then you're going to get into really good shape, as opposed to Mech, which Mech is just a very much straight up kind of bully you army composition. You can see the Terran player still trying to be fancy with these drops. Picks off a couple of things, loses a couple units, no big deal. Goes back in his medevacs. The biggest thing is that it's keeping this army on this side of the map so that he can take these bases basically uncontested. There's one Lingen here. It's being really annoying. Trying to kill these SCVs here, and he needs to just fight this with his SCVs or do something about it. He's doing nothing right now. But army's composition getting weirder and weirder here for the Zerg player. I would have really liked to see Infestors a long time ago. Infestors would have locked this army down to the point where there's no way you could disengage from these Ultras because all of your army would be stuck in one place. In every single fight he's been crashing through pretty well and doing pretty decently, but at the same time you need the long-lasting effect of the Ultralisks combined with the Fungals so that you can actually take these down. Here's another good point that I need to mention. So you see a huge drop coming in here to the backside base. And all these spines will at least buy time. So you might say, all these spines are just dying. That seems so pointless. But what they did is they bought time enough to get the army back here. He may actually still get the base, though. So this Terran player making really good decisions with these drops. And picks up at least most of the army and still gets out of there. He does lose some to the Hydra, so it's kind of a shame. But even still, getting a good trade there is the Terran player. What I was going to say is that the good thing about having all these extra command centers is that if you happen to lose one because of a longer and crazier game, you can just lift one off, float it right back down here, and re-land and be mining on that as soon as possible. So another good reason, if you have money sitting around and not really doing anything, just make extra command centers because you never know when they're going to come into play. Hatchery's trying to be rebuilt here, so you can see the income for the Zerg is starting to get a little scrappy. He's not mining on this base, he's barely mining on this base, or at least he could be. There's only 2 patches. Not mining in the main, so guess what? All of a sudden the Zerg player's on 1 base's worth of mining. And here comes another attack. As you can see, the rolling up here are all the Banelings and the Ultralisks just crashing into everything, but I think the Terran player finally has enough to repel this. And you can see the Banelings being wasted on the tanks there. That's kind of a shame as well. Ultra Hydra is the composition right now. Here's a fusion core coming down here as battlecruisers are viable in the late game for this matchup. Look at the Zerg's income right now. 0 minerals per minute. This is why you need to get a handle on these drops and find some way to deal with it. Now we see the mutas coming out, but the whole point behind mutas in this matchup is that they'll be able to shut down drops so that they can't just keep coming in here, sniping bases and leaving. Because if you let that happen over and over and over, all of a sudden you're on no mining. And the income, I mean, he has 68 drones and still less income than a 33 worker Terran. Only because he's having to distance mine off of this one base. This base isn't quite at operational. As you can see, drones are getting transferred there right now. Ideally, as Zerg, you'd like to have this base, you'd like to have this base, and if you have mutas on the map so that you can deal with the medevacs, you can just put an end to those drops. Well, these mutas actually spot this medevac here, and they're not. They're just ignoring it and killing the turret, so that's kind of a mistake right there. Banelings are being morphed here over at the side. Try and kill more SCVs. The muta's dealing a lot of damage to these turrets here, and at the very least, it's forcing him to move his army around here. So he's having to bring the Vikings back, having to pull some Marines. Finally, there's some Infestors on the way to help out with these Ultralisks and whatnot. Another drop comes down here, though, and this might actually just be too much damage output. He can get this hatchery right now and just get out of there. The Hydras, you like to see him actually just focusing on the medevacs because he does target them in the last minute. But now, guess what? He's back down to 1 base's worth of mining. And this base has not been rebuilt, as you can see it ghosting right now. It will be rebuilt eventually, but still, there were some Banelings that, oh yeah, here they come right now. They're going to start trying to crash in this mineral line, but there's just not a lot of workers here. So, like I was talking about, with Terran, you don't need that many workers in the late game. 25 SCVs, but still, his mining is almost as good as Zerg player. At least once the Zerg player starts getting this base up, it'll be almost as good. Right now, it's actually a little better because he can drop mules. But these fringe bases should be dropping a lot of mules. He should have some workers being created here. So this is the power of having these bases that they don't know about. And any base you can mine off for this long, especially as Terran, I mean, what's the worst case that happens here? You drop mules constantly on these patches. 2 or 3 mules will basically pay for this orbital command, and then if it gets attacked, you just lift off and you go away. So now the transition to battlecruisers, I mean, he has the fusion core ready, he just doesn't have tech labs yet, but once the battlecruisers come up, I just fear that the Zerg won't have enough income to deal with everything that the Terran player will have on the field right now. So we can see Mutalisk trying to get over here and get some work done, but there's just so many turrets, there's turrets everywhere. There really shouldn't be any reason why these Mutalisks should do a lot. But Mutalisks, they will at least pick off this drop, and that's one good thing, so you can finally see what we're talking about in action. But the Mutalisk's whole point is just to kill these drops off and prevent you from taking too much damage. I really have to say though, the Zerg is being a little reckless. These are about to mine out, so he's going to be back down to 1 base's worth of mining, which feels like something we've said over and over and over. So you want to take this base, you want to take this base, and maybe if you had realized that this was up, you could cancel this one and take this one instead. It's a little safer and further away from the Terran player. But he's getting a little bit lazy about getting on top of more bases as the Zerg, and it's going to start to hurt him because, I mean, yeah, he'll have a big army, but if he loses that army, then what? He has no income. So that's going to be a really big issue. Here come the BCs on the way right now. Kind of a miss rally on this medevac, or rather on the starport making medevacs. So he needs to realize that as well. And finally he found one of these bases, and he's like, okay, well this starts to make a little more sense because you've been able to hold all these attacks off, and you've had a huge army. And the whole time I've thought you've basically only been mining on this base, and this base is almost mined out. So he's probably finally putting the pieces together and saying, well, this starts to make a little more sense. This command center is going to die. There's really no point even paying attention to it anymore. So that command center goes down. But look at this ginormous army from the Terran player. And if he could get some good position, like on the top of this ramp or something, and force the Zerg to attack into him, this is going to be really brutal, going in favor of the Terran player. Does he actually realize there's a base over here? I think he should have. Yeah, he'll know now. So he knows that there's a base over here. Already pulling some units down here. It's actually to deal with the drop. It's not to deal with that base. But at the same time, he moved the army out of position, and the Zerg is really pulling way too much out of the side. The fungals could be huge here if he could chain these, though. Starts to get big fungals on this army, as we can see the hit points being pulled up. But this base is going to die, and if this base dies, that's his only mining. This will be 0 bases worth of mining. And yeah, it's going to die because he pulled way too much stuff to deal with that one drop down here at the bottom side. We can see Vito's in here starting to cancel this base, but at the same time, the Terran's army is just huge. There's no way this is ever going to get stopped unless he really makes a mistake. Fungal's starting to come down here on top of the army. The ultimates should start to crash in, but even still, this is just way too much Terran stuff. You can see the bile starting to stim up here, and these fungals are actually huge, but at the same time, I just don't think there's enough. And yeah, SpeeDy says GG and quits out of the game there. So interesting game. I hope you guys learned at least something from this, which is the whole point of these videos. At the very minimum, at least that was an entertaining game, so I hope you guys got something out of this. If you guys want to do some analysis and get some information on your own replays, check out stu2replaystats.com. They have a really cool feature where they will just automatically pick up your replays that you play, and they'll be dropped on the site right away, so you can take a look at any one of them. It's a really cool resource for you guys, so check that out. Until the next video, which I'm not sure what it will be at this point, I'll see you guys later, and take care.